Welcome. You're watching Rugby with Rifle, a podcast about all things rugby and life, with your host, Danny Pabone and Rifle Scudder.
Welcome to another episode of Rugby with Rifle, a podcast about all things rugby and life. So we are recording here a few days after Christmas, so we are near New Year's. Rifle, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing very well. Thank you yourself, Danny, but very difficult to believe that 2024 is almost in the bag. We got one more day and then it's done. So that's pretty amazing. But other than that, I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah, I can't believe we're about to ring in 2025. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And I was speaking to a high school friend of mine that I ran into the other day. I haven't spoken to him in quite a few years. Next year, and I know I'm younger than you, Rifle, so don't make fun of me. But next year, I was talking to a friend, and next year will mark my 25th year high school reunion. Can't believe it.
Yeah.
25 years. Next year is my 25th high school reunion. So it's unbelievable how fast time flies.
I know how that feels.
So with that, everyone, in today's episode, we are going to just do a preview of 2024. And I know, Rifle, in a previous episode, we have spoken about the different tournaments that go on in international rugby throughout the year. You know, Six Nations, Rugby Championship. We just had the Autumn Nation Series just last month. And then we also are going to talk about the Irish rugby team touring South Africa as well. So we just wanted to do a preview of 2024. And we are also, I remember, Rifle, a month, I believe, or a month and 1 day away from the Six Nations tournament
Correct. Yes,
starting.
there we go.
So I believe it starts either the 30th or the 31st of
The
January.
last weekend in January, yeah. So literally
So
just a month away, and then we'll have our international rugby again.
wow, those international rugby players they're tough because they pretty much play all year round.
Yeah, but I have to say now there's still the club rugby. So yesterday, and not yesterday, on Saturday, South Africa, we had in this URC that we looked at last episode, we had South African teams playing against each other. So we had the Sharks playing against the Stormers, which is a huge derby in South Africa. And what's amazing is so many Springboks in both sides. So you had, these two local teams playing against each other, but so many Springboks in there playing against each other as well. So remember 3 weekends ago, I was so sad because every single one of my teams lost in South Africa.
Yes.
But this week we had to have some of them win because they played against each other again. So it was good.
Yeah, so you don't know which team to root for?
No, it's difficult. I've got my side, but as long as the South African team wins, it's good. And then this
Yeah.
weekend it did happen. It was a humdinger of a game, but it ended. The Stormers just beat the Sharks, so it was a good game.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because rugby, especially at the international level, I guess soccer is pretty much the same as well. You have year-round, uh, year-round games, whether it's at the club level or at the international level.
Yeah,
So it's pretty cool to see,
just have to know where to look
yes.
to find the games. But there is definitely rugby happening almost all year round, which is, as you say, it's very hard on the players, but it's nice to watch.
Yes, it is. It's nice to watch, not to play.
Yeah.
So with that, so again, we're going to do a nice little 2024 review, and we're going to go over the Six Nations, the Irish touring South Africa, the Rugby Championship Tournament, the Autumn Nations Series, which just happened, like we said, last month. And we're going to talk about the different players and awards that they have won. So it's going to be pretty cool to just talk about individual players and something that I don't think yet we have done yet. So I'm looking forward to that. So let's just start with the Six Nations. So, Rifle, one thing that I found interesting, and me just being a novice, learning the sport of rugby, especially at the international level, um, I was looking at the Six Nations, and then I was looking at the different dates, and me coming from more of an American style league, I was like, okay, when was the championship game for the Six Nations? And then once I started reading, I realized that's not how the tournament goes. They go by points. So there
Correct.
isn't necessarily a championship game where, okay, these two team plays. So it was interesting to see me again having the American mindset of having a semifinal, playoff, semifinal, finals. It was interesting to see how the Six Nations is not set up that way.
You can liken that, Danny, to sometimes you'll see in the NFL, which you are very familiar with, that a team does very good in the preseason and then they get a playoff berth. And even if they lose one or two games towards the end of the normal regular season, because they've done so well, they still go through. So no matter if they lose one or two games at the end, because they've done so well, the first half of the season, they've already scored their place in the playoff games. So it's not a points or if you lose this game, you know you're out. So you'll
Yeah.
find that in the Six Nations as well, that sometimes even before the last game has been played, the last Saturday, when all the teams play, that you basically know who the winner's going to be because they've got so many bonus points, they've won so
Mm.
many games, they've scored so many tries. So the winner could even be known sometimes before the last game has even been played because of the bonus and the point system that we work on.
Wow. So that's very, very interesting.
It
Um,
is because in that last week, and this is the one, I'm sure it's in other sports as well, but even the team that knows they've lost and they can't win, they still go out that last game and all they can play for is pride. They
yeah.
can't win, they can't, the first place has been taken, they can't get there, but they still go out there that day wanting to show that they can, on any day, any team can win. So it doesn't matter, even if you can't win the tournament, you still play for your jersey, you play for your nation, and you play for pride. So you'll find that often happens in the Six Nations as well.
Now, I, I, I'm just curious. I don't know if you know the answer to this. Well, you probably do, but um, for example, Ireland won the Six Nations this year because they had the most points, 20 points. And it's not 20 points that they scored 20 tries or 20 things. It's 20 points based on a point system within the tournament
Correct, yes.
that we won't get into because it could get quite complex.
Yes, you can get deep in the weeds there if you've won by more than so many tries, if you've lost by fewer than 4 points a
Yeah.
game. So the point system is difficult to go into. We won't do that now, but yes, they have 20 points at the end of the whole tournament, not 20 tries or 20 points that they scored, but 20 points as the point system allows per team.
Yes. So my question is, being that I'm sure Ireland, was it the case this year that Ireland knew by the last game that they were going to win the tournament? And if that's the case, do you usually see players, like for example in the NFL, once you get towards closer to the postseason, if a team knows that they're going to be in the playoffs, or if they have their first or second place in their conference, they usually tend to rest their players the last uh, either the last game or the last two games.
It can happen and sometimes does, but I would say not most of the time.
Okay.
For example, in the 2023 Rugby World Cup, when France played a very, very weaker nation, they still kept Anton Dupont in, and that's where he broke his jawbone in that game. And people were saying, you're going through, you're going to the quarterfinals, you're playing, I can't even remember who it was, but it was a three-tier nation, basically. Why would you play your best player? And that's when he broke his jawbone. So the people were very angry, the French were very angry about that. But yes, it can happen, but very, very seldom, I would say, in rugby, would you take a player off, like in football, and put like a second string team in there just to make sure the guys don't get hurt. Maybe I'm correcting myself in what real time here, but next year when New Zealand are going to play against France, that is what France said they're going to do. They're going to send a whole second tier team to New Zealand. So New Zealand are very unhappy about that because they want to play the best French side. But it's not like something for the Six Nations. It's just a one-off tour between New Zealand and France that France are doing that. So to answer your question, and maybe it's not very clear, it can happen, it does happen, but not very often in rugby, not as often as what we see in football. Sorry if it's not that clear as an answer.
No, 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 no. That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. And the other
Well,
thing with the rugby as well, you must remember, and you know this now because you've studied and you've learned a lot now, there aren't that many reserves. In rugby, you got your
mhm.
what? You got your 15 on the field and then you got your 8, you know? So there's not that many. The only team that basically can do that currently in the rugby world system is South Africa, where we can keep half of our team in South Africa and send the other half to go and play as we did in the Tri Nations. But not many other teams can do that. So you have to keep the best guys on the field to maintain your status in the world rugby. So that's another thing that's a little bit different because in football, I believe you have a 53-man roster.
Yep.
Where in rugby you don't. You got your 15 on the field and the guys on the bench, and that's it. So there are not so many players that you can replace them with. So that's another thing just to take into consideration, the difference between the rugby and the NFL.
Well, yeah, that is a good point. I really didn't factor that in. But yeah, that does make sense.
How many quarterbacks does a team have every game?
Depends. Most teams have
Okay,
two quarterbacks.
so you'll at least two.
Yep.
You'll have the guy on the field, and then you'll have a backup, or sometimes even a secondary. So you got three quarterbacks at some games. Where at rugby you don't have three scrum halves or three fly halves or three centers, sitting next to the field just waiting. So that's a big difference between the two.
Cool. Cool.
So,
So,
seeing that we're talking here about the Six Nations, what was interesting about this year's Six Nations, because it was 2024, which was after the World Cup in 2023, people were specifically looking at Ireland and France because they both of them lost in the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup, which was at the end of 23. So they had a point to prove when they came back into the international system in 2024. And the first international games that both of those teams played was in the Six Nations. So they wanted to run out on the field and prove that they actually were better than what the results shown they were, or how they did in the 2023 World Cup. We obviously know Ireland hasn't gone past the quarterfinals, so that's what people call the curse of the Irish. They can't get past the quarterfinals. They lost against New Zealand, and France lost against South Africa. And that is what a lot of people were talking about. That was one of the talk. There were others looking at England, how they're going to do. And then to me, as I said in many, many programs, the saddest thing of this whole statistical board that you have here is Wales.
Yeah.
I mean, there you got four, lost 4 games there. Lost 5. It's just very, very sad because Wales at one stage, I mean, they were such an amazing rugby nation. And I really hope they can get back to their old glory because the world rugby needs them. But to me, that's the saddest thing of this whole thing is just where Wales was and where Wales currently is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. And every time you mention Wales, I always think about your friend that we met. One day.
Yeah, we'll talk to him again.
Yeah, maybe we could get him on when Wales is doing good.
Yeah,
Maybe
that would be good. Yeah,
maybe
he's
he'll be more up to it.
got some amazing stories about, back in the day. He played rugby himself. He was a wing, but he's got some really, really good stories about the Welsh rugby.
Cool. Cool. Hopefully we could do that one day.
Yeah.
So as you see, everyone here, Ireland was through the point system was the champion, I guess. Are they considered champion or just winners of the Six Nations?
Yeah, the Six Nation champions.
Okay.
Yeah. And what happened the previous year, if I remember correctly, Ireland also won, and they won it in a Grand Slam, which means they didn't lose a game. So when they played in 2023 in the Six Nations, and they took it with a Grand Slam, everybody was saying this year is Ireland's year for the World Cup, and they're so good, and they're going to do it. And that Irish curse. Quarterfinals, they lost to New Zealand again. So that's what I say. That was a big thing in this year's Six Nations, was to see how Ireland does. And obviously their captain, Johnny Sexton, he retired. So they wanted to see how the team will continue without him there. So there was a lot of interesting points to look at in this year's Six Nations.
So the one thing that I just wanted to ask you, because I don't know if we have ever covered this. I see that France and Italy finished in a tie. So what is the procedure? Is it the ref says, okay, we're gonna have a certain amount of extra time, and if once that extra time finishes, that's it. We end in a tie?
Yes,
Okay.
that's how it will be. Yeah, especially in like the World Cup, you'll have completed the time, then you'll have extra time. And I believe if after extra time you still tie, don't quote me on this, but I think some of the players have to kick for posts, I think.
Okay.
But in the Six Nations and that, you don't have that. It's just if you play your game and time is finished, that's the end of the game. You just go on. Because of the point system, there'll be a game next week again. And because of the point system, it's not like a knockout. If you must or you lose this game, you're out.
Okay.
Because of the point system, we don't have that.
Okay. Cool. Cool. It's very interesting, this point system.
Yes.
It's different again from my Americanized sports league.
Yes, very much. Very much.
Cool. So the next thing on, I guess it's not a tournament, but was a tour. We have the Irish rugby team touring South Africa, and pretty much uh, South Africa won one and they lost one. So both teams ended the tour with a 1-1 record.
Yes. This was a big thing because of South Africa winning the Rugby World Cup and being number 1 in the world. But we lost to Ireland in the pool games.
Yes, I
So
remember that.
A lot of people, Irish and a lot of other people were saying Ireland is the best team in the world.
I remember that.
South Africa are very good with knockouts. They love the knockout. When they got their backs against the wall, they find a way to win. They will not lose in a knockout game. So you don't want to play South Africa in knockout in a World Cup. But between the World Cups, they're not as doggish, if I can put that word out there, like they are in a World Cup where they have to win every game. So South Africa lost to Ireland, but they won the World Cup. So Ireland had a huge chip on their shoulder. They had a point to prove, because what they were saying is, we beat the best team in the world. We beat the world champions. Nobody else did, but we did. So we better than them. We could have won the World Cup. Irish curse, lost in the quarterfinals to New Zealand. So they were ready to come to South Africa and prove to the world that they were number one. And then obviously the first game they lost, so they couldn't do it. Even if they won the second game, it wouldn't matter, because if they were really that good as what they said they would demolish us, which they didn't. And when they came to South Africa, I remember so well, because South Africa's got maybe 4 or 5 stadiums that we play. And 2 of the stadiums is absolute horror for a visiting team when they come to South Africa to play. And those 2 stadiums are the first one there, Loftusversveld, that's in Pretoria. And the other one is Ellis Park, which is in Johannesburg. And you can talk to, or you can listen to any international player that comes to these 2 venues to play the Springboks. They absolutely hate it because of the crowd, because of just you can feel the energy, the atmosphere in the air, how everyone is just against the other team and they want the Springboks to win. So the South Africans were even asking, why would you have a game at Kings Park, which is in Durban? And Durban is our beach town or beach city. You got your surfers, it's, you talk about Durban time, people are laid back, it's very slow, everything. So when people got to Durban, it was such a huge party atmosphere and the people were, just in such a good mood. You do not want that when an international team is coming to play the Springboks. Why would you have the game at Durban? And then so many South Africans from Durban were there when they played. I remember it so well when they played the Irish national anthem. You had a lot of South Africans, there'd be a brandy and Coke singing the national anthem for Ireland with them. And people were, what in the world are you doing? You're just creating a party atmosphere. You can't have the Springboks play against Ireland in this atmosphere. So,
Yeah.
And then as you can see, we lost 24-25 with a last second drop goal from Ireland. We led to the absolute last minute. Guy put a drop kick over, end of game, and we lost. So it ended up 1-1. But I remember all those funny little things that happened, and you can't have a game in Durban if you really want to kill the opponent, especially coming from Loftus and going from that atmosphere. Now you go to the Durban friendly South African, you can't do that. But so that was it was good. I mean, it was good rugby, amazing. And there, look at that, 27-20. There's 7 points, 24. So in 2 games, the difference was 8 points. I mean, in that's what I say. The level of rugby and standards that we have now, any team on any given day can beat any other team, the top tier. And look at that. There's 8 points in 2 games, which is phenomenal. And that just shows you how good South Africa and Ireland are, as top tier countries.
Yes, it does. Both games were pretty much till the end, nail biters.
Correct, yes. And there's a guy from England, his name is Tim. His podcast is called Egg Chasers.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually went to South Africa to find out what makes South African rugby and South African people so different. Why do we love rugby? Why is it such a big thing? Why is it a religion in our country? And he went to South Africa and he did his podcast as he traveled, and people invited him into their homes, and he went around to the different games and he went to game parks and saw a lot of South Africa while he was there. but he did such an amazing job. If you want to see a little bit of that specific tour, the Irish tour to South Africa, go and check out Tim's channel, Egg Chasers, and go back to July and watch those episodes that he did. Really, really good. There's a lot of information about South Africa there if you want to learn about South African, the rugby, the culture, the atmosphere, the brine, the brandy and coke, and all of that. All of that is taken in those podcasts of his, which were very good.
Yeah, I believe I watched a clip of one of his when he was mentioning the wild dogs.
That's correct. I sent you that because Rassie was saying in the World Cup when we played, I think it was France, he said, now I want you to go out second half. You must be a bunch of wild dogs. And Tim didn't understand it until he got to South Africa and he went to a game reserve and they spoke to him and showed him a pack of wild dogs and how they hunt. And then it made sense what Rassie said. You know, he completely just thought go out and just be wild. And that's not what Rassie was saying at all. They're very technical. They're very specific in the way that they hunt, and they stay together as a bunch of dogs, and they don't, you know, they do things in a specific manner. And that's what our coach was saying during that game.
Yes, and for those of you who are wondering, we did a 2 or 3 episodes on a series called Chasing the Sun, and there's Chasing the Sun 1 and Chasing the Sun 2. One is about the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and 2 is about the 2023 Rugby World Cup. So if you want to see a great documentary, rugbypass.tv, create a free account and watch those 2 documentaries. You won't regret it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
a lot of the stuff about wild dogs and Ireland losing to South Africa in the 2023 rugby. I mean, Ireland beating South Africa in the pool play, and then going on to the quarterfinals and the finals. I mean, it's just an amazing, amazing documentary. And for me, watching that documentary and Chasing the Sun, I haven't gotten to around to Chasing the Sun two, the first one, Chasing the Sun 1, but watching Chasing the Sun 2, it really got me hyped up and wanting to run through a wall. I mean, it was such a great documentary, so I recommend it to everybody. If you haven't done it yet, watch that documentary. It's amazing stuff. Okay, so our next Rugby Championship, and surprise, surprise, South Africa took this tournament as well, 24 points. Now, New Zealand had was it, because I wasn't able to watch any of the, well, watch all the games in its entirety. I've just watched little clips of these different games from the Rugby Championship. But from the score, was South Africa as dominant as the scores tell here? From your perspective, Rifle.
Yes, they were. As I've said many times on our podcast, South Africa right now is just we in a purple patch. And our team is absolutely phenomenal. We got such a great coach in Rassie Erasmus and what he's done with the culture of the team. And we were most definitely the best. Once again, the points, if you see our games against New Zealand, we won by 1 point one of the games, not many points in another. So 24 is a lot of points. If you look at 16, which is second place New Zealand, if you just take South Africa against New Zealand, those games, it wasn't that big of a difference. It was once again on the day. I remember the one game where New Zealand came to South, they were leading. Most of the game they led, and people were thinking, this is it, New Zealand's going to take it. Once again, South Africa came back against the wall in a corner, and they come out, fighting and firing on all cylinders, and they won. Where South Africa gained a lot of those points was against, for example, Australia, where we got a lot of bonus points and extra tries that we scored. So that pushed our tally way above what the other teams did. But South Africa against New Zealand, those two games, close games, hard games. So the point system here, I think, made us look better than what we were. Because if you just take on face value the two games that South Africa played the All Blacks, it was very hard and very close.
Cool. Yeah, and seeing here South Africa pretty much uh doubled, points favored, points allowed. So they scored double the amount of points than the points they allowed.
Yep.
So that's pretty dominant.
And what we did here as well, what we were speaking about in the previous slide, is when South Africa went to Argentina to play them, we left a lot of our A-team guys or the best guys, and we gave them not a rest. We put other guys in to see if they can handle the pressure. You were talking about, would you put your second string in for Rassie, and what he's trying to do is maybe put younger guys into a very hostile environment and see how they handle it. Can you handle that pressure? Can you play your best rugby when things are not going exactly the way you want it to go? How your head is going to handle the pressure? Can you stay cool under pressure? All of those things he wants to test. And then just different experiments with, for example, a scrum half and a fly half. Change the style of play. One of our fly halves is very attacking, where the other one is better at methodical kicking and mastermind, like a chess game. So one of the games we lost to Argentina. So Argentina in this table here, they beat New Zealand, they beat South Africa, and they beat Australia. So Argentina, who we know is a great football nation or soccer nation, they beat every one of these nations on here in rugby. But when we took our team to go to Argentina and play there, we actually lost. So Rassie just trying to, put youngsters in there and see how they play and change the style of the Springboks currently and do little different things than what people are expecting them to do. So the 24 there, that's including a loss that we had to Argentina as well. So we have to take that in consideration. The only game that was really, really, really close, other than the one we lost to Argentina, was South Africa, New Zealand. So once again, the point system doesn't, if you don't know what happened the whole time, you look at the points and think, that's terrible. That's amazing. But South Africa at this stage we're back at number one because when we lost to Argentina, we went back to number two. And then Ireland went back to number one, and Ireland was saying, we're number one, but then they lost the game. So we are number one in the world again in the rankings, but we did win the rugby championship again. So that was good for South Africa because New Zealand, I think South Africa has won from 2000. South Africa has maybe won, I think it's 5 or 6. New Zealand has won something like 15. So in the big scheme of things, New Zealand, the All Blacks, they're phenomenal. It's just South Africa within the last couple of years, as I say, since 2018, when Rassie took over, we were really bad. We were not good. And he's just changed the culture and he's changed the game. He's changed how the guys play for one another, for the country. And since 2019, we have been doing better and better and better. But before that, it was all the All Blacks. Hands down, New Zealand all the way.
Yeah, it is very reminiscent to football in, for example, the past couple of decades, I would liken the New Zealand to the Patriots
Patriots, yeah.
and South Africa to the Kansas City Chiefs, where, 2000 to maybe 2017, maybe 20 or so, about 17, you had the Patriots were very, very, very dominant.
Yes.
And then around 2016, 2017, Mahomes comes into the league. And now the Kansas City have overtaken the NFL, and now that's the team to beat now is
Yes,
Kansas City.
yes,
And for me, that's unfortunate because Kansas City is the Raiders' rival. I'm a Raiders
yeah,
fan, so we have to deal with we have to deal with Mahomes probably for the next decade. So that sucks. But yeah, so that reminds South Africa has so, so many similarities to Kansas City because and I say that because Kansas City is a team where they could have injured players and somehow they find a way to win,
yeah,
no matter what.
yeah.
They could be down 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and somehow they find a way to win. You're
They
like,
come
it
back.
just blows your mind. You're like, how in the world did they do that?
Yeah. No, it's the
So
same for
yeah,
South Africa, yeah. But the other thing looking at this chart for me is just like the previous one where I said Wales, Australia, look what they got. They got five,
wow,
and they lost 5 games. So, I mean, that's shocking for Australia, who, they were Rugby World Cup champions. They were number 1 in the world. I mean, if you think back in the day, Australia was so great. But after this, and even during this, the game that they won, Joe Schmidt, their new coach, they started doing better. So when the rugby championship was finished, and then the next time Australia played was what we're going to go to now is the Autumn Nations, my goodness, they were not the same team. So
mm,
the saddest thing on here is to see the state of Australian rugby, just like the Welsh rugby. But to Australia's credit, Joe Schmidt has turned them around and they are becoming stronger and stronger. And they picked up their game in such a way that they actually did very good, compared to this in the Autumn Nations. So we are very hopeful that next year when the British and Irish Lions go and tour Australia, that it's going to be a fair and a good competition. So that's a sad thing in this, is that Australia only have 5 points, which is shocking because
yeah.
if you think of the Australian teams of the past, they were just so dominant and so good.
And I remember you mentioning the part of the reasons for that is because Australia has a kind of a different a rugby league that has somewhat of a different rules and form.
Yes, they play rugby league, and then they've got Aussie rules. So they got different. So they're 3 big rugby, all have their own rules and regulations. But a lot of people are moving away from rugby, going to rugby league and Aussie rules rugby. So that's one thing that hurt them a lot as well. But as I say, Joe Schmidt has come back and he's got some guys from league that have transferred back to rugby union, and they're playing for him now and for Australia, and they're doing well. So Australia is definitely coming back, which is good to see.
Yeah, it's similar to, I guess, to, American football
Yeah,
and Canadian football.
yes,
Canadian football. I've actually watched a few games. I actually went to one game uh, in Calgary, Canadian football game. And I was like, what? Wow, this
yes,
totally,
very different.
totally different. So, yeah, so it's interesting. Maybe we could do one episode on the difference between the Rugby Union Australia
Yes,
and what's the other Rugby League?
rugby league. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Interesting, very interesting stuff. Thank you for watching this episode of Rugby with Rifle. Remember to press the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet to support this podcast.